27 degrees Celsius here in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily, your daily dose of sunshine and clarity. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusuf.
Okay, so now we have a bit of an addition. Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde. It's 28 degrees here in Lagos. Today is March 2nd. And it's one day that I never forget because I remember it's also the birthday of Pastor Enoch Adeboye. So happy birthday, sir. Welcome to the show.
Indeed, we wish the revered man of God very well. But Ayo, you do know that in our country right now, quite a number of things have been afoot. Yesterday was a citizens' town hall meeting held by the Civil Society Network on election integrity. And it's also 2 days after U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, which they now say have left Iranian leader Ayatollah Khamenei dead, as well as a number of other senior figures within the Iranian government. So these are issues we're going to be looking at on this program, but we're going to be starting first with a local issue, especially on the issue of election integrity. We know that 2 weeks ago, the Nigerian Senate and House of Representatives passed a particular bill, the new Electoral Act. They repealed it and they enacted a new one, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has signed that new act into law. But during the week, that's last week, on Thursday precisely, opposition members in different political parties came together. They had a joint press conference rejecting that new law and saying that they didn't want it, that there needs to be a second look at that law which has now been passed. A conversation happened yesterday and quite a number of issues also came up. Well, right here in our studios this morning, we have a prominent member of the opposition party, Mr. Kenneth Okonkwo. Is a public affairs analyst, a columnist, a lawyer and politician. I don't see here where it says member of the ADC, but you haven't hidden the fact that you are a member of the ADC.
The National Working Committee, for that matter.
Indeed. Are you the spokesperson?
No, I am not.
Okay, but you do.
Bolaji Abdullahi is the spokesperson.
Indeed, actually.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Sunrise Daily. Quite a number of issues to take a look at. I'm not certain, were you part of the Citizens Town Hall meeting yesterday?
No, I wasn't part of it as in physically.
Yeah,
but
you watched it.
I eavesdropped.
Indeed.
You know, happy new month to Nigerians.
Indeed.
Nice being here.
Happy new month indeed. Well, quite a number of things to look at from that, from the outcomes of that particular meeting. And for Nigerians who missed it, we have some snippets coming out of that meeting. One of them was from the INEC chairman, where he said that they will not be able to guarantee 100% election integrity, but they certainly will do their best. Here's what he said at that meeting.
And any Nigerian desire is a perfect election. And INEC will strive as much as possible to give this country the best election. However, we may not be able to achieve 100% perfect election for now. But as far as electronic transmission of results is concerned, I said it before FCT Area Council that we have the capacity to transmit the results. And that we're going to transmit the results. The only concern was real time. What is real time? For instance, if you use your app to make a transfer from your account, even in Abuja town, you are transferring 50,000 to Mr. B, and from your app, the amount has gone. But the person may not receive the alert until another 30 minutes, another hour, or even in the evening. So those are some of the things. And when you say it is real time, as soon as it is done, it must be received. So result management and logistics are two basic issues that from our own end, we're trying to see how best we're able to manage it very well, so as to enhance the transparency and credibility of the system.
I wish that you can look into the camera and promise Nigerians that under Professor Joash Ampito, election of 2027 will be the best ever. Is that a promise that you can give us?
By the grace of God, election of 2027 will be the best election that Nigerians will have. Because Nigerians of 2023 is different from what you have in 2027. people are much more aware. And you know the correlation between election and development. Nobody is happy about the classification of Nigeria as an underdeveloped country. So we want a situation where our process will be able to guarantee the confidence and the legitimacy that people will want to see in their system.
Well, the idea behind that particular town hall meeting was to seek clarity, hold INEC's foot to the fire, let them know the weight of the expectations on them, and also to get their own thinking, their reassurance that they indeed are ready to meet the expectations of Nigerians. Watching that town hall meeting yesterday, did you get that?
You look, Nigerians have never lacked charisma. If policies and churning out good talks is only what it needs to be a developed nation, who will be the number one? Our problem has always been implementation. And so I wouldn't be carried away by fairy tales, because we've been deceived a lot by good talkers. We want good doers. Even God Almighty said, it's not the sayers of the words that are justified, but the doers of it. So what we are going to judge anybody is by the actions. Professor Yakubu Mahmood was even more charismatic than Joash Amipoton. I heard he's a professor of history. He said that when he will be announcing the results, there will be a big television on his head showing what he's announcing, and the whole world will be seeing it. He guaranteed everything about electronic transmission of results. And on the election day, he told you he had technical glitch. The definition has defied even the greatest professors. Now, what we are praying for is, please match your words with action. Why is it that we are the most blessed country on earth, and the adjectives that they use to describe us, fantastically corrupt, the poorest nation, most traumatized by terrorists, the most underdeveloped? Why? Because we don't live up to the true meaning of our words. So words now don't matter. We are expecting actions.
Indeed. Certainly, I mean, some people will say the taste of the pudding will be in the eating, and I'm sure a lot of people will be looking forward to that. But if we're to go by what we have experienced so far, because the ADC as well as a number of other political parties came together last week to voice their dissatisfaction with the new Electoral Act as passed. And people were wondering, hold on, did you people just wake up to see what was happening? This was the big debate in the National Assembly for the last 2-3 weeks. How is it that, it's after the deed has been done that the APC, the ADC, the NNPP, and a number of other political parties were just waking up. So it seemed. But they said, the argument they made was that this was informed by what they saw in the FCT council polls, which INEC conducts. I'm still a little uncertain as to what precisely the coalition opposition parties saw. Maybe you want to give a little clarity.
Sure.
But then it will seem some people say, look, we haven't quite felt the presence of opposition as we ought to in terms of their preparations for the forthcoming elections.
Good. You know what you just said is echoing the dubious propaganda of APC. Why do I say that? Nigerians should not be carried away by what this dubious APC is doing. Why am I saying that again? Are you aware that up till now, the gazetted copy of the Electoral Act 2026 is not out? APC is intentionally hiding everything so that Nigerians do not even understand until it is too late. The FCT election was conducted under an unknown law. And this is against the rule of law. Before you implement a law on a people, it must be publicly published. That's one of the cardinal principles that will make law to achieve its primary function, which is orderliness in the society. Now, the National Assembly dubiously changed what they originally agreed on. Everybody agreed on mandatory transmission of results. And that was what they settled until Tinubu called them and say, no, this is what I want. And then they put this devilish proviso. And that was after the fight from the opposition. So when people say you're not feeling what the opposition is doing, have you forgotten that Senator Fabio wanted to go back to 2022 Electoral Act? That was the first amendment. It was the opposition figures fight that made them to now go back to put the electronic transmission to make it compulsory. But they now added a proviso, very devilish, enemies of democracy, to water down, to cut down the import of the main clause in the statute. We have been the most vibrant opposition party on earth, but people are not looking at the devilish covering of information. I said up till now. So we are even going ahead of APC by even bringing the discourse of what they have even refused to publish for Nigerians. Immediately an act becomes law, you publish it in the Gazette. Have you seen any? So these Nigerians should please hold this government of destruction into account, as we are doing. The FCT election, after it was conducted under an unknown law, we are still interrogating it. Now let me come to the Electoral Act 2026 and tell you the things that are done. Everybody already knows the popular one, that the electronic transmission is now compulsory with an unintelligent proviso which makes no meaning in front of law. Because they said if there's communication failure that makes it impossible for you to transmit, you will go back to the manually generated result. Now here is the catch. Even the electronic transmission is still the preservation of the manual. So nobody ever said you should dispose of the manual. What we are saying is that you should store the manual, preserve it, so that the integrity will be preserved as what you produced in the polling unit. Now again, when you finish the election, you take the beavers to the collation center. The electronic result is already stored in the beavers. And it's from the beavers that you get the accreditation figures. So if you can get the accreditation figures from the beavers, why wouldn't you get the result that is already stored in the beavers? And again, you don't need communication network to transmit, as Josh Amipoto pointed out, as Yakubu has pointed out. So then what's the meaning of the proviso? You don't need, okay, if you snap me with your phone, automatically my image drops in your gallery. And you can upload to any person in your phone or any group platform. What you need network is for you to download, not to upload. And once the presiding officer finishes the uploading, his job is finished. The downloading is reserved for the collation officer that will receive it. And even if he doesn't receive it, the copy is already in the beavers. So that settles it. So no presiding officer should tell anybody that he cannot upload. Then that means he wants to rig election. And you have the right as a Nigerian citizen to use reasonable force to prevent him from committing a crime in your presence. Now, let's go to the other very dangerous provisions.
Is that a law?
Yes, of course, that's a law.
Using reasonable force?
Yes, to prevent anybody from committing a crime in your presence. If I'm in this place...
Under what law is
First and foremost, Section 24, subsection E of the Constitution say you're under obligation to assist the lawful agencies to maintain law and order. If anybody breaks into this house and wants to harm the beautiful Malpe, and I have very powerful weapon, I will bring the person down. And I will not be criminally liable. Because Section 33 said I have the right to bring him down to protect your life. But that's by the way. Section 33 of the Nigerian Constitution. So anybody who wants to perform civilian coup, Tinubu just arrested some military people and say they plan a coup against him. That's military coup. When you rig election, that's civilian coup. Because you want to subvert the will of the people. And people have the right to use reasonable force. And I mark my word, when you want to commit crime in their presence.
It's a reasonable force. Well,
yes.
What would that be?
If I give you a slap to reset your brain, because they say anybody that enters APC, his brain stops working. So if I give you a slap to reset your brain, Supreme Court has said that a slap given to a man, there is no intention that grievous harm will be, hit on him. So that's reasonable force. So reasonable force depends on the offense, the level of the offense that you have committed. If it's treasonable offense, I have the right to use reasonable force on you, even if it leads to your death. I'm not criminally liable. Like if somebody wants to kill somebody, and I use reasonable force to stop him, even if the person dies, that's his own problem. But if somebody wants to pick my phone or something, so, and you want to kill the person, so it depends on what the person wants to do. Now, that's by the way. Now, let's go to the Electoral Act. This new provision cuts the time that they will give money to INEC to 6 months. And it used to be 1 year in the former act. When it was 1 year, INEC still has problem with logistics in elections. You can imagine when it is 6 months. When will this institution prepare? There are things you need to print. There are a whole lot of things that you need to do. Have they not worsened the case? They have worsened it. Why? Because Tinubu does not know how to implement budgets. 2024, 2025, 2026 budgets, none of them has been implemented. The Minister of Health told you that he asked for billions and has received only 36 million in 2025 budget. So what are we saying? INEC now, that ought to have received this money by January. Budget that ought to have been ready by Constitution by December. They are still debating it by March. What a tragedy of a government. Now, let's go into the Electoral Act. You have seen how APC said indirect primary, they removed it. Why? Direct primary is there. If direct primary is what you want, then you choose direct primary. Why instruct all parties to do direct primary or consensus? Where APC has ever done direct primary, crisis had broken out. In Lagos State, in the local government election, you saw the crisis. 3 persons died in Ondo State in the World Congress. So a recipe for disaster, they want to impose it on the opposition. Why remove indirect primary? Indirect primary is still an election where all members are involved. You vote for the delegates that will represent you people, all the members in the world. Vote for the delegate that will represent them at the national level and choose the candidates. Why remove it? Let me tell you, APC is an evil government that wants to destroy Nigeria, but God will not agree. All this intention is to destroy the opposition. The other.
No, you have just said that.
Yes, just one more point. Just one more point.
Okay.
They said in a month's time, every party should submit digitalized membership. The same APC that is telling you INEC cannot transmit results because of network is asking opposition parties to send digitalized. So they know that we can digitalize electronic. And INEC that did not ask for you to give them the discretion, you are giving it to them. Let me point out one thing. If anything happens to our election, I'm going to hold Josh and Mepito and INEC responsible. Because by law, they have the independence to choose whatever they want to do the election. Jega introduced card reader. It was not stated in the law, but there's nothing illegal about it. Yakub introduced IRF portal. It was not stated in the law. There was nothing illegal about it. INEC is the sole organization that conducts, supervises, and undertakes election. So they should not give any reason. Even if there was no provision for electronic transmission, they still ought to give us free and fair election. Jega did it. And his elections are still the most credible. So I'm going to hold Josh and Mopito because it's an integrity issue more than even legal issues. Responsible. No politician I shall hold responsible.
Indeed, and that's why a number of people will think that by now the pressure will be, from opposition parties will be on INEC because, as you mentioned, there was an uproar within the National Assembly. You mentioned how at least the House of Representatives had given and made transmission of election results electronic transmission compulsory.
And the Senate?
The Senate, as a matter of fact, you said, and I think the Senate President reiterated, yes, the Senate did say that they were leaving it as is in the 2022 Electoral
That's when they came back from the research.
Until, there was an uproar, and then they adjusted and then put that proviso. And then it was when there was supposed to be a merger, what they call that, harmonization, that we now saw that it would seem that it was the House of Representatives that had to give room even though they said the harmonization committee never really met, but what we now saw at the end of the day, because well, they explained that there was a repeal. I'm not a lawyer, I do not know what these processes are, but they said there was a repeal and then there was a reenactment, and that there was no need for harmonization. But what we now finally got was this one that makes it was like taking an element from this House of Representatives, mandatory election transmission, but then that proviso, that now very controversial proviso. But that has since passed from what we saw, and it would seem like it was a compromise. It would seem a compromise between what the Senate and the House of Representatives had passed. That's what it would seem. It would seem that at the time, even though, yes, there was some opposition, will I say, resistance to it, because we saw members of the opposition walk out in the National Assembly, in the House of Representatives. We also saw the rockers.
And address the people as only.
Yes, we saw that. But at the end of the day, we also know that voting is about numbers.
Yes.
If you're going to pass something, you need the numbers, no matter what the protest is. If you don't get the numbers, it's as good as dead on arrival. So we saw that happen in the National Assembly, and we thought, oh, the opposition seemed to have raised his hands, you know, in acceptance of what had happened. Anyway, that went on, and we didn't hear much again until the FCT elections were conducted, and we assumed that given what we now knew, that there should be attention paid to how the elections were conducted in the FCT. Apart from the fact that there were, you know, late deployment of materials in some polling units.
Everything was wrong.
And then, you know, allegations of vote buying here and there, and, you know, there were visuals to that, and there were arrests made in that regard. We haven't really heard much about the process. What was faulty in the process as adopted by INEC? The opposition doesn't seem to have been able to hit the nail on the head with regards to the objections they had with how INEC conducted the polls in the
That's
FCT.
why I'm telling you that it is APC's strategy. You're just waking up from FCT election and they are telling you you're going to submit digitalized membership in a month's time. The FCT election has already been concluded a sham. I told you it was conducted under an unknown law. I am not saying under an illegal law. I'm saying under an unknown law.
Because the law has not been gazetted.
I have not seen it. Have you seen it? And it's against the rule of law because it must be publicly published. And international protocol said 6 months before any election, you have to publish the law so that everybody will know the law you're going into. And this National Assembly promulgated the law on the 17th, and Tinubu rushed to sign it when he has not even read what is in it because he said it gives him headache. Then on the 18th of February, and the election is 3 days. You signed it on maybe on Wednesday. You have only Thursday, because on Friday they will stop all the broadcast, because you have to stop broadcast 24 hours at a time. Then on Saturday, Wike said there is restriction of movement. Almost 24 hours, 8 p.m. before that day. And on that day, he was walking around all the polling units interfering in the election, which was illegal. Because if you say restriction of movement, it should also affect you. He's not an elected officer. He is not an INEC officer. He's not connected with the election in any way. The security on election day is under the direction of INEC. In UK, remember, when Prime Minister Boris Johnson ordered restriction of movement during the COVID-19 era, he himself moved and even celebrated party. It was one of the reasons he was told to step down. Recall that Governor Baseke was disallowed from entering into INEC places during the election. A sitting governor has immunity. And Wike, who gave the order, couldn't even respect the order he gave. And was going from polling unit to polling unit, interfering in the election. This APC is irresponsible. Even by their own laws, they can't keep. Now, let me proceed. You know about the mutilated results in some areas. You know about the violence in some areas. At the end of the day, what were you expecting? There was voter intimidation, voter buying, voter apathy in Amak. You have around 873,000 registered voters. About 65,000 voted. 7.7% turnout. Because they restricted movement. So this election was skewed against the opposition.
Which it
so
does
that
not...
the ruling APC will walk away with it. But you know what?
Mr. Okonkwo, I'm just, whilst I'm not, these are all the extraneous, it will seem, factors.
No, it's not extraneous.
No, just a moment. These are not about the polls themselves. If you get what I'm trying to say.
No, I don't get it.
This is not within the power of INEC.
So
it will seem, I mean, all of these restrictions that was not within.
That's why I didn't mention INEC.
Yeah, but largely,
I mentioned the APC.
The issues that have been raised about the objections that the opposition has with the Electoral Act has to do largely with INEC. You've talked about direct and indirect primaries, their restrictions. You've talked about the 6 months that, INEC should now get its funds. That is about INEC. You've talked about the register that, you're being made to submit now, an e-register. That also seems to be INEC, because INEC is the regulatory body.
No.
But in terms of the conduct of the 2026 FCT Council polls, all the objections that have been raised are around the conduct. And INEC always says this, that it is a multi-stakeholder event, and that they are the lead stakeholder, but they are not the only stakeholder, and that all of these other factors. So do you think that right now, given what we have experienced in the FCT Council polls, the opposition parties have been barking up the wrong tree?
No. INEC has no power over the laws. What you saw in the laws is APC machination to rig election 2027. You can't hold INEC responsible. So when it comes to the primaries of political parties, you can't hold INEC responsible. It's not INEC's duty. If you recall what I said I will hold Josh Ameputon responsible for whatever happens in 2027 election. I did not say primaries. I told you, look at what APC is doing. They removed direct primary from the law. I'm holding it responsible. Indirect primary. They removed indirect primary from the law. That's APC's machination. It has nothing to do with INEC.
Yeah, but we also saw, you used to say, just a moment, this issue about direct and indirect, we also saw just how corrupt that process used to be.
Which one?
The indirect primaries. The fact that we know that delegates used to make a killing from indirect primaries. The fact that we knew it was cash out season for delegates, who have been elected. Yes, they have been elected, but we also know how easily influenced a few delegates can be by candidates that have deep pockets. Don't you think that this has been done in the interest? This is just because I remember there was a time when there was huge focus on the type of primaries, and I remember there was a time, not this particular elections or not this electoral act, there was a time when there was a lot of clamor for direct primaries to be the only way that candidates emerge. We had direct primaries or consensus. There was a huge clamor for for political parties to do away with indirect primaries. In some way, don't you think that they might have done Nigeria a favor?
Oh, well, you have been a journalist for a while now.
Indeed.
I have never seen anybody sit in this seat and is clamoring that indirect should be removed.
Oh, there was a time. There was a time when that happened.
I said, I have not seen, but you can give evidence of that. What they were clamoring then is that there should be options, not that anyone will be removed. In indirect primary, at least you will see an indirect primary. Indirect primary, you will not see anything. Are you not in Nigeria where people will be lined up and you're hearing 200, 300, 400? That is what direct primary looks like. So you're saying deep pockets. I know of somebody that spent $30,000 per candidate and still failed in indirect primary. Indirect primary, Tinubu will be in his house and write the results and tell you that is what all the members voted for. Where do you have the register of members? Where did they meet? Where will you start to go to court if you are a participant? Are you able to assemble all the people that voted throughout the 36 states of the federation? So direct primary means that there will be no primary. Indirect primary means there is a possibility there could be primary for how we are today. So that is why you have to leave the options. In all the places you had direct primary, it has ended in fiasco. All. So it's either consensus or indirect primary or direct primary. We're not saying you should remove direct primary. We're saying you should leave the choice. Even the courts admitted that they don't have power to inquire into the internal affairs of political party. So why is APC intruding into the internal affairs of political parties?
Won't there be victims as well? Because
no, there will be victims as well. Take my words for it. That's why I say a lot of them are very unintelligent.
Do you think it's...
By the time they sit down and write those delegates and write the candidates, there will be trouble. That is why they pushed and reduced the time by law when you will submit candidates, so it will be closer to the election. So by the time they do all their corruption, those people that will be maltreated will not have the time to go to another party and become candidates there. But I tell you, there is still God that ruleth in the affairs of men. And he will judge this APC. And in 2027, they will know what happened to them. They will collapse.
Before Ayo judges me for dominating this conversation, Ayo, over to you.
Well, thank you, Malpe. You know, Mr. Okonkwo, there's a question that is just playing on my mind as I listen to you, and a number of people will probably wonder, isn't this a way of saying that the opposition is not ready for the elections? Isn't this like creating a lacuna for the opposition to say, look, we didn't have enough time? Pretty much creating the narrative that this whole election was skewed against the opposition in the first place, as opposed to preparing, you know, adequately for the election. You said it the other time, or was it you, or maybe our previous program, I was saying that there are some parties that are fully ready and there are some that are not ready. The issue that you raised, for instance, of the digital register of members, that is a crucial one. And I'm wondering if you think all political parties are ready with that one as we speak. Because right now, with all the issues that you have raised, we shouted PDP when the PDP was at the center, but we don't mention the state governors. We are now shouting the APC when the APC is at the center, but no one is talking about the state government. So isn't this a way of saying, look, opposition, this is the fuel you need to protest whatever the results of the elections will be?
Well, you know, like I told you, APC wants to block all breathing space for the opposition so that they will think they would, you know, they will kill the opposition. You know how they infiltrated all parties. What destroyed PDP, for instance, is the presidential ambition of Tinubu, nothing else. So they want to emasculate the opposition parties, and you can see that they made it now a law. So what you're seeing is conscious effort of a party that is unpopular, that knows it will lose if he allows free, fair, and credible election. So they now want to use institutionalized method to rig the election before even the day of election. I told you here when I came in, I said, look, don't judge us by FCT municipal election. But they would have at least organized free, fair, and credible election to give people hope. Because the whole reason for the apathy of Nigerians is because they don't believe that even if they come out, their votes will count. That is why people must do the right thing. So, opposition, they want to snuff us out of the electoral process, and we are gasping for breath. But I tell you, we will win. So the issue is that APC started their digitalized registration almost last year. And they now came to make it a law and say a month. For parties, some parties were registered just last month. Registered for the first time. And then you're giving them this Herculean task that you could not even give INEC, that you will give 400 billion naira. You're telling INEC, no, you cannot transmit. INEC is saying, no, we can't. We have the capacity. You heard Josh Amumpito. We have the capacity. And you're telling INEC, you that doesn't know anything in INEC, And then you are telling parties they must digitalize before 1 month. Can't you see? It is obvious. This is fraud. This is capture. They want to capture the election before it happens. So what I'm telling you is, what we are asking for is time. You cannot give such new thing. You have not even published the law. And you're saying people should do something before 1 month. The law is not gazetted. The law is not out. So what we are even doing is being proactive. That was why I told Mark, no, your position, this is the most viral opposition since the birth of democracy. Because you are fighting without even having the equipment. Because this APC wants to defraud the system. Pure state capture, election capture, through default, through ensuring that they corrupt the process. So I understand
this
we
same
are
thing,
doing our best.
Yeah, Mr. Okonkwo, if you can hear
the power
me.
we can do.
Yeah, this same thing you are saying is what we always say about ruling parties. The PDP, we said exactly the same thing you're saying now, and yet at the appropriate, or should I say at an opportune time, despite having so many governors, as you know, a number of people in the opposition have also said, the PDP lost an election, a general election, the presidential election at that. So having the number of governors and all these issues that you have raised, there are those who will tell you, look, it doesn't really still guarantee anything. At the end of the day, it is expected to be the people. So I go back to the issues. First of all, do you think political parties themselves were prepared for the general election, for the 2023 elections, before this electoral act? Because even if we were to sustain the Electoral Act of 2022, do you think the political parties are prepared? Because many people don't hear about these opposition parties saying anything constructive until an election is impending. So why should Nigerians trust an opposition party that they don't hear of until it's 1 year to an election?
All right. Ayo, if you noticed, I did not mention anything about the governors, because with respect to you, the governors have no role to play at all when it comes to the issue of election. That is why you see most governors running into APC, because they want just self-preservation, not that they have anything as in love with APC. As long as election is concerned, INEC is a federal executive body, and the laws that guide INEC's activities made by National Assembly, none by the State Assembly. So the governors have no blame. They have nothing to do. They are just like other Nigerians who are maybe more powerful than others and can use the instrumentality of the state if they have the buy-in of the federal government. That is the reason why they are going into APC, so that they don't want somebody to use federal might against them. That's why it's irrelevant to talk about the governors. Maybe, Ayo, you should say you are not hearing from the opposition, because the opposition is saying something every day and giving constructive advice. Immediately Tinubu came in, he removed subsidy. Within 24 hours, opposition, including myself, we were saying this is a wrong policy because it's coming at the wrong time, not that removing subsidy is not necessary. I said this government will not sustain it. I said what you need before you remove subsidy is we need to have regular supply and there will be no monopoly. If you do that, you remove the subsidy. And I said you should sell off the refineries. We gave all these recommendations. Tinubu did not sell off the refineries. He invested billions on the refineries. They have gone down the drains. So you cannot advise a deaf and dumb government because they don't hear. And you cannot say the opposition is not offering constructive criticism because the government in power that is deaf do not hear and they are dumb. They tell only lies. So the opposition has been offering constructive criticism. Give me one thing, one policy that this government has done, and I will tell you the position of the opposition on it. So please, it is because the government is deaf and dumb. So address the criticism where it belongs. The opposition is doing well, but this government is perverse. And the only thing is to remove them completely and let them not come back in the name of Jesus.
In the following days, we certainly will be keeping tabs with the opposition to see how they eventually fare and organize and prepare an alternative platform for the Nigerian people, presenting themselves as a credible alternative to the current party in power. But in the meantime, we have to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Mr. Kenneth Okonkwo is a member of the National Working Committee of the African Democratic Congress, a public affairs analyst, a columnist, a lawyer, and of course, a politician. Thank you so much for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll be looking at the aftermath and the consequences of U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran. In just a moment, please stay with us.
Well, that's our next conversation this morning, as Maokwe already highlighted to us the other time. The U.S. and Israel conducted a military strike on Iran, and the latest operation and details and objectives are already playing out. Captain Bish Johnson joins us this morning. He's a former U.S. Army personnel. He's a national security and defense strategist. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Captain.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Did this come to you as a surprise?
No, not at all. If you have been following this president, and I have been very, very particular on President Trump 2.0 as against President Trump 1.0. If you have been following this president, you know that this president is a president that will be saying one thing. He is planning a different thing behind the scenes, and then next thing you know, boom, he has launched that thing that he is planning. I knew it as they were going through that diplomacy, and for him to have moved that amount of forces, if I tell you what it costs to move an aircraft carrier from the United States and position it around Iran just on a daily basis, no government will do that if they're not serious about what they're trying to do. And so with that amount of force that was positioned in the Middle East, what happened on Saturday was not a surprise to me.
The consequences are still playing out, there is no doubt about it. But there is a question a number of people have asked over time, Captain, and that's the fact that since this Trump 2.0, as you put it, has been playing out, the United Nations has said little or not much to curtail anything. The U.S. decided to pull out of some international organizations and nothing has happened. But now, with this attack, even in the invasion of that visit they paid to, I think it was Venezuela, it would seem like not much was heard from the United Nations or from any world leader to say why. And now this is happening. What are the consequences of that for international peace?
Not at all. Consequences, as far as I am concerned, the consequences are only for poor countries like Nigeria and African countries. Some of these great powers, there are no consequences for them. You saw what happened and what is still playing out in Ukraine. What are the consequences for Putin and Russia? None. And you saw what is happening and what happened in Gaza. What are the consequences for Netanyahu and Israel? Zero. You see, I am not a fan of the United Nations. The United Nations, as far as I'm concerned, is the toothless bulldog. United Nations, America accounts for 25% of United Nations annual budget. And so you know that whoever plays the pipe dictates the tone. And the United Nations, as far as I am concerned, is the most undemocratic institution on the face of the planet. Yet they advance for democracy all over the world. This is an institution where the vote of one nation overrides the vote of all the countries of the world put together. And so how democratic is such an institution? I don't take the United Nations seriously, and I don't expect the United Nations to be able to do anything because they have done nothing. Look at Sudan. Look at what is happening in Sudan. Look at what is happening in DRC Congo. Look at what is happening in Ukraine. Look at what happened in Gaza. So the United Nations, as far as I am concerned, is useless and has not been able to solve any problem. And even Donald Trump himself knows that because the day he inaugurated his peace board, he mentioned it that those international institutions have not been able to provide the peace for which they were established to do, which was the reason why he was setting up his peace board.
So what would be your counsel to Nigeria? What should be the position of Nigeria in all of this? I know, of course, I'm sure you are also aware, the Nigerian government has put out a statement asking for peace, you know, in the world as a result of this. Of course, we know that Iran has begun to take its own action as well, and perhaps maybe one or two allies here and there may be doing a thing or two as well. But what should, in your opinion, what are the consequences for Nigeria? Do you think Nigeria has a reason to take a position on this matter? And if we would, what should it be?
Well, Nigeria has always has a position, time immemorial. And Nigerian position has been that Nigeria is a non-allied nation and that Africa has been the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. I have been an advocate for that. I have said consistently in all my articles and all my positions that Nigeria should remain so. Nigeria should take what is called the strategic neutrality and sometimes strategic ambiguity in some of all these flashpoint issues in the world. Because we have our own problems to deal with here in Nigeria. And the solution to our problems here in Nigeria do not lie in one block. The solutions to our problems in Nigeria, we can seek them from several of all these blocks. And so if we don't align ourselves with any block, it gives us the wiggle room to be able to seek solutions from those blocks when necessary. So I will advise Nigeria to continue to maintain that position of neutrality or position of strategic ambiguity and continue to remain non-allied nation and continue to make Africa the centerpiece of its foreign policy. That is my position, and that will be my recommendation to Nigeria.
Well, you have had very strong words for the United Nations, and some people will say, well, the United Nations can only do as much as it is empowered to do. We do know the structure of the United Nations, and we do know that, you know, the powerful countries that hold veto power, one of them is very involved in this new, I'm looking for the right word, I want to say strike. My mouth is saying onslaught on Iran, because this has been a preemptive strike. That's what they have called it, not necessitated by any immediate threat. It just came out of the blues, even though some people say, well, intelligence forces had been looking before now to see how they could, carry out a pretty neat operation in Iran. But it has now kept that region in a place of great uncertainty, because we saw how Iran fired back. Couldn't really hit a lot of targets, but we saw the strike on Qatar, on Dubai, on Bahrain, a number of other U.S. allies within that particular region. What do you think this spells? Because some people say whether or not Nigeria remains non-allied, whether we try to bury our head in the sand, there are elements here that also affect us. We heard about a protest, a Shiite protest happening in some parts of the north, in a particular area, and even though we understand that might be under control, but it does raise concerns about how people now perceive the United States and Israel, because they haven't quite followed any known rule in terms of their justification for the attack on Iran. What are your thoughts?
Well, if you had listened to Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, the statement that he made, I believe it was some time ago in Europe, where he said, if you are not on the table, you will become the menu. And so, look, Nigeria, I have consistently said that this country has the potential to be a great power. I don't see the reason why we are not the China of Africa. We ought to be the China of Africa. What is happening in the world now is not going to change anytime soon. This is an era of great power flexing muscle, and they're not going to stop. They will continue to flex muscle to see who flexes more muscle than the other. And so what we need to do as a nation is that we have to find a way to get a seat on the table so that we are not the menu. And the way we achieve it is to build our economy, a very robust economy, empower our people. Let me tell you something. You see, the economic revolution that you're seeing taking place in China today, the foundation was laid in 1978 when their leader, Deng Xiaoping, was in charge. They carried out a lot of reforms. Those reforms came with the pains, but they endured those pains. And today the Chinese people are witnessing over 4 decades of continuous economic prosperity. And that's what Nigeria needs to do. The problem we have had in this country is that no generation of leadership in this country had been willing and able to make the sacrifices so that the future generations can benefit. We have always kicked the can down the road. We've always borrowed and borrowed so that we can satisfy our insatiable wants, not even needs, at the expense of the future generation. So if we don't want to be the menu, we have to take a seat on the table, and the way we achieve it is to grow our economy, strengthen our economy, and build a robust military. I am someone that believes that you must have a very powerful military if you are going to be an economic might, so that you will be able to protect and defend that economy. That is what Nigeria ought to do. Well, if we don't live in isolation, unfortunately. What happens in other places will affect us. But that does not mean that we should always become meddlesome interlopers in issues that do not have direct impact to our own survival and existence. Nigeria should focus on addressing its own internal issues, such as insecurity, such as lack of infrastructural deficit, such as massive unemployment, inflation, all those things. We should work on them and maintain strategic neutrality or even strategic ambiguity.
Indeed, well, there will be questions about how Nigeria intends to manage the short-term fallout of this new war between Iran, U.S. and Israel, because we do know that energy prices might be affected as a result of this, and it clearly will have effect on the price that Nigerians pay for fuel as well as electricity. But we certainly will keep tabs on the developments in the Middle East, and we certainly will also be requiring your diligence on this particular matter, Captain Bish Johnson. But we have to thank you very much for sharing your immediate thoughts with us. Did you want to quickly say something?
One second. For what we are seeing today has gone up to $100 from what I understand this morning, and that is good for us. So in that case, now we'll be able to meet our budget benchmark of $60-something a barrel. So sometimes it's not a bad thing for countries like us when this kind of things are happening. We just have to be able to know how to manage them.
Indeed, we're looking forward to how the Nigerian government will manage it, because don't forget also that we now also pay the full price of the refined products that come from the price of crude oil. So we'll see how that eventually pans out in Nigeria. But we have to thank you so much for speaking with us. Captain Bish Johnson is an ex-U.S. Army personnel and also a national security and defense strategist. Well, that's all we have for you on the program this Monday morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Please join us at 10 a.m. for the media parley with the FCT minister. Amaokpe Ogun Yusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Enjoy the rest of your day.